The relentless, driving rain hammered against the sleek black roof of the luxury Mercedes-Benz as it cruised down the desolate stretch of the midnight highway. The world outside was nothing but a blur of slick asphalt and the hypnotic, rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers pushing the heavy downpour aside. Inside the cabin, the environment was perfectly controlled, smelling faintly of expensive leather and quiet exhaustion. Sitting behind the steering wheel was Aaliyah. She was a 52-year-old black woman with a brilliant mind, piercing intelligent eyes, and a crown of gorgeous natural curls that framed a face etched with years of hard-fought wisdom. She wore a tailored black wool trench coat, driving home after a grueling 14-hour day. The night was supposed to be over. It was meant to be a quiet transition from the immense weight of her professional life back to the sanctuary of her home. But then, the darkness of the rearview mirror was violently shattered by the blinding, chaotic strobe of red and blue police lights. Aaliyah's heart did not panic, but her jaw tightened with a deeply familiar, completely exhausting sense of dread. She pulled the $150,000 luxury vehicle onto the muddy shoulder of the highway, the gravel crunching beneath her tires as the police cruiser parked aggressively close behind her. Through the rain-soaked side mirror, she watched the dark silhouette of a police officer step out into the storm. His name was Connor. He was a 29-year-old white patrolman wearing thick tactical gloves and wielding a heavy, solid metal flashlight. But Connor did not walk straight to her window. Instead, he deliberately paused at the rear passenger side of her pristine vehicle. And then, in a moment of pure, unchecked corruption that would forever alter the course of his life, Connor raised his heavy metal flashlight and violently smashed it down onto the red plastic casing of Aaliyah's taillight. The sickening crunch of shattering plastic echoed through the freezing rain. Connor smirked, fully believing he had just manufactured the perfect probable cause to drag a wealthy black woman out of her expensive car. But Connor had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He had no idea that the woman sitting patiently inside was not just an average citizen. She was a sitting United States federal judge, and he had just violently destroyed her property on a high-definition 360-degree surveillance camera. Have you ever found yourself completely at the mercy of a corrupt authority figure who blatantly fabricated a lie just to exert control over your life and threaten your freedom? Drop your story in the comments below because I read every single one of them, and exposing these terrifying abuses of power is the only way we can drag the truth out into the light. To truly comprehend the catastrophic legal and psychological avalanche that is about to crush this rogue police officer, we have to dive deeply into the minds of the two people sitting on this dark, rain-swept highway. Let us start with Aaliyah. At 52 years old, Aaliyah is an absolute titan of the American legal system. She is a United States District Judge, appointed to a lifetime tenure on the federal bench, a woman who has spent 3 decades mastering the intricate, complex labyrinth of constitutional law. Her mind is a razor-sharp steel trap. She has presided over massive civil rights cases, federal corruption trials, and massive corporate lawsuits. But to reach this pinnacle of power, Aaliyah had to fight through a system that constantly tried to diminish her. As a black woman in America, she knows intimately that all of her degrees, all of her wealth, and all of her federal authority offers zero protection when she is just another driver on a dark road. She knows that a black person driving a $150,000 luxury vehicle is a massive trigger for the fragile egos of deeply prejudiced police officers. Aaliyah is intimately familiar with the terrifying reality of driving while black. She has spent her entire life compartmentalizing the trauma of being racially profiled, learning to suppress her entirely justified anger in order to survive encounters with men who have badges and guns. She operates with a chilling, unbreakable calmness because she understands the law far better than the people hired to enforce it. When she heard the sickening crunch of her taillight shattering, she did not scream. She did not panic. Her brilliant legal mind instantly cataloged the offense. It was a blatant violation of her Fourth Amendment rights, a destruction of private property, and an egregious act of official misconduct. Walking up to her driver's side window is Officer Connor. He is 29 years old, a man deeply infected by a toxic warrior cop mentality that treats every single civilian as an enemy combatant. A deep dive into Connor's psychological profile reveals a man who is addicted to the thrill of the hunt. He is someone who uses his badge not as a shield to protect the innocent, but as a weapon to punish anyone he feels does not belong. Connor has a thick file of citizen complaints, mostly from minority drivers, detailing illegal searches, aggressive behavior, and fabricated traffic charges. But because the system is inherently broken, his precinct has swept every single complaint under the rug. This slowly taught Connor that he is completely invincible. Tonight, the rain was pouring, the roads were empty, and Connor was bored. When his headlights illuminated the sleek, expensive curves of a brand new Mercedes-Benz, and he saw a black woman behind the wheel, his implicit bias and predatory instincts took total control. He instantly assumed she was either driving a stolen car or participating in illicit activities. But because Aaliyah was driving perfectly within the speed limit and maintaining her lane, Connor had absolutely no legal justification to initiate a traffic stop. This lack of probable cause did not stop him. Driven by pure arrogance, he activated his lights, fully intending to invent a reason once he got her pulled over. Smashed taillights are the oldest trick in the book for corrupt cops. It is a quick, untraceable way to claim a vehicle is unsafe and justify a completely illegal fishing expedition. Connor firmly believed that his word would always be taken over hers. He was entirely unaware that his every movement was being recorded by the high-tech security system built directly into the chassis of the luxury sedan. Sitting in the passenger seat of the police cruiser, watching this entire nightmare unfold through the rain-splattered windshield is Marcus. Marcus is a 24-year-old rookie officer, barely out of the academy, and he is terrified. He watched his training officer step out into the rain, saw him pause at the back of the Mercedes, and clearly saw Connor raise his flashlight and shatter the taillight. A sick, heavy knot formed in Marcus's stomach. He knew this was a felony. He knew this was corruption in its purest form. But the blue wall of silence is a terrifying psychological prison. Marcus was paralyzed by the fear of retaliation, knowing that if he stepped out of the cruiser and arrested his own partner, his career in law enforcement would be over before it even began. So he sat there in the dark, completely complicit by his silence, praying that this traffic stop would end quietly. Connor marched up to the driver's side window, his heavy boots splashing in the muddy puddles forming on the shoulder of the highway. He tapped his metal flashlight aggressively against the rain-slicked glass. Aaliyah pressed the button, and the window glided down smoothly, letting in the freezing wind and the roaring sound of the storm. Connor immediately shined his blindingly bright flashlight directly into her face. This is a classic intimidation tactic designed to disorient and dominate the civilian. Aaliyah did not flinch. She simply squinted through the harsh glare, her hands resting comfortably at 10 and 2 on the leather steering wheel. Connor leaned in close, the smell of wet wool and stale coffee radiating off his uniform. "You were swerving, and your taillight is busted. Step out of the vehicle right now before things get ugly for you. I know exactly why you pulled me over, and my vehicle was in perfect working condition 30 seconds ago. Are you calling me a liar? I can pull you out of this car and have your car impounded for resisting. You have just manufactured probable cause, and you picked the absolute worst person in this state to practice your corruption on. Get out of the car! You're going in cuffs!" Before we watch the spectacular downfall of Officer Connor, we must pause the narrative and dive deeply into 3 terrifying alternative realities. These 3 what-if scenarios expose the rotting core of a justice system that is fundamentally rigged against minority citizens. First, we absolutely must ask what would have happened if the driver of this $150,000 Mercedes had been a wealthy, 50-year-old white man in a tailored business suit. If Connor had run the plates and walked up to see a white corporate executive behind the wheel, this entire interaction would have been fundamentally different. There would have been no smashed taillight. There would have been no aggressive flashlight shined directly into the driver's eyes. Connor's implicit bias would have immediately categorized a wealthy white man in a luxury car as a person of status. He would have viewed him as a person who likely knew the mayor, or the police chief, or a team of expensive lawyers. The stop would have been terrifyingly polite. Connor would have approached the window with deference, addressed the driver as "Sir," and likely let him go with a completely friendly warning to be careful in the rain. The absolute privilege of being presumed innocent, of being treated with basic human dignity rather than immediate violent suspicion, is a luxury that is completely denied to Aaliyah because of the color of her skin. Connor's willingness to casually destroy her property proves that he viewed her not as a citizen to be respected, but as a target to be conquered. Second, we have to confront the horrifying reality of what would have happened if Aaliyah had reacted with entirely justified human anger. Imagine if she had completely lost her temper when she heard her expensive taillight shatter. What if she had unbuckled her seatbelt rapidly, yelled at the officer, and reached quickly into her glove compartment to grab her phone to record him? In any normal human interaction, becoming furious when someone destroys your property is a completely natural response. But for a black woman trapped in a dark car with an armed police officer, anger is a deadly luxury. If Aaliyah had shown even a fraction of the aggression that Connor was projecting, he would have immediately weaponized her reaction to justify extreme physical violence. He would have screamed that she was reaching for a weapon, drawn his service pistol, and potentially ended her life right there in the rain. And the ensuing police report would have been a masterclass in character assassination. Connor would have claimed she was highly erratic, non-compliant, and incredibly dangerous. He would have used the broken taillight as physical proof that she was an irresponsible and reckless driver. Aaliyah's entire life, her decades of brilliant legal work, would have been violently erased and replaced with a racist caricature of an angry black woman. She knew this terrifying reality intimately, which is exactly why she remained completely frozen in a state of absolute, terrifying calm. Third, and perhaps most chilling of all, we have to look at the legal nightmare that would have unfolded if Aaliyah did not have a high-tech 360-degree dashcam system running in her car. What if this was an older vehicle, with no cameras, and just the desolate highway and the pouring rain as witnesses? This is the darkest, most terrifying reality of the American justice system. Without video evidence, this encounter becomes a simple game of he said, she said. And in a courtroom, the badge almost always wins. Connor would have written a completely fabricated police report, claiming he pulled her over for a broken taillight and she became aggressively combative. Aaliyah would have filed a formal complaint, but Internal Affairs would have looked at Connor's official report. They would have looked at the physically broken taillight and instantly dismissed her claims as the desperate lies of a disgruntled motorist trying to get out of a ticket. Even as a federal judge, her word would have been fiercely contested by the massive legal power of the police union. The burden of proof in the court of public opinion always falls on the victim to prove they were abused, rather than on the officer to prove they acted lawfully. It is a terrifying realization that millions of citizens face every single day. They live knowing that a corrupt cop can completely ruin their life, and the system will blindly protect the badge. But tonight, the universe had aligned to deliver a massive, devastating dose of karma to Officer Connor. Sitting in the freezing rain, listening to the rookie officer bark his aggressive demands, Aaliyah did not argue. She did not beg. She knew that arguing with a street-level tyrant was a complete waste of her intellectual energy. She simply stared at him through the rain-slicked window, her expression completely unchanged by his ridiculous threats. Slowly, with deliberate, highly telegraphed movements, Aaliyah unbuckled her seatbelt. She reached for the interior door handle and pushed the heavy luxury door open. This forced Connor to take a small step back into a deep, muddy puddle. Aaliyah stepped out of the vehicle, the cold rain instantly soaking into the shoulders of her dark wool trench coat. She stood perfectly upright, projecting an aura of absolute, unshakable authority that completely dwarfed the young officer. Connor, entirely high on his own perceived power, unclipped his heavy metal handcuffs from his duty belt. He took a step forward, ready to forcefully grab her wrists and slam her against the side of her own vehicle. "Turn around and put your hands on the roof!" Connor yelled over the sound of the rain, his flashlight glaring into her calm eyes. Aaliyah did not turn around. Instead, she reached her right hand slowly inside the breast pocket of her tailored trench coat. Connor's eyes widened in sudden panic. His hand instinctively dropped to the grip of his service weapon. He was fully prepared to draw his gun and escalate this manufactured stop into a fatal tragedy. But Aaliyah's hand emerged holding a thick, heavy leather folio. With a swift, decisive motion, she flipped the leather folio open and held it up directly into the glaring beam of Connor's flashlight. Nestled perfectly inside the leather was a massive, gleaming gold federal badge, and directly beneath it was a pristine United States Department of Justice identification card bearing her photograph. The rain poured down around them, washing over the shiny gold seal of the United States District Court. Connor stopped dead in his tracks. The heavy metal handcuffs in his left hand suddenly felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. He squinted through the rain, his brain desperately trying to process the visual information right in front of him. He leaned in closer, reading the bold black letters printed on the federal ID. Aaliyah, United States District Judge. The color completely drained from Connor's face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost standing in the pouring rain. The arrogant smirk that had defined his entire existence vanished in an absolute instant. His mind rapidly cascaded through the horrifying realization of exactly what he had just done. He had not just pulled over a random civilian. He had just aggressively detained, threatened to assault, and intentionally destroyed the property of one of the highest-ranking judicial officials in the entire federal government. Aaliyah looked directly into his terrified, trembling eyes. Her voice cut through the roar of the highway storm like a surgical scalpel. "I am a sitting judge for the United States Federal Court, and my vehicle is equipped with a 360-degree surveillance system that captures audio and video in high definition. I have you on camera destroying my taillight. You are currently in violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. You have exactly 10 seconds to call your commanding officer to this location, or I will call the FBI field office myself and have you federally indicted before the sun comes up." The silence that followed was deafening. It was broken only by the relentless pounding of the rain against the asphalt. Connor could not speak. His throat felt completely swollen shut. His hands began to shake so violently that he nearly dropped his heavy flashlight. He slowly backed away from Aaliyah, his entire world collapsing around him in real time. He reached for the radio mic attached to his shoulder. His voice cracked into a pathetic, high-pitched squeak as he frantically requested his shift captain to report to his location immediately. Sitting in the cruiser, Rookie Officer Marcus buried his face in his hands. He knew it was over. He knew his training officer had just signed his own federal prison sentence. 15 agonizingly long minutes later, an unmarked black police SUV came tearing down the highway. Its lights cut through the darkness as the vehicle violently swerved onto the shoulder, parking at a sharp angle behind Connor's cruiser. The doors flew open, and Captain Elena stepped out into the storm. Elena was a hardened, fiercely intelligent 48-year-old precinct captain who had spent years trying to root out the bad apples in her department. She marched through the rain, taking one look at the completely paralyzed Connor. She then looked at the beautiful black woman standing calmly by her Mercedes holding a federal badge. Captain Elena immediately recognized Judge Aaliyah. Elena had testified in Aaliyah's federal courtroom just 3 months prior. The captain's stomach completely dropped into her shoes. Elena approached the judge, her posture rigid with profound professional deference. "Your Honor, are you all right? What exactly has happened here?" Aaliyah calmly pulled her smartphone from her pocket. She swiped on the screen and pulled up the live feed from her vehicle's integrated security system. She tapped a button, and the high-definition video from the rear passenger camera began to play. The screen clearly showed Connor approaching the rear of the car, looking around to make sure no one was watching. Then, it showed him violently smashing the taillight with his heavy metal flashlight. Captain Elena watched the footage in absolute silent horror. The evidence was completely irrefutable. It was a completely documented felony committed by a uniformed officer. Elena slowly turned to look at Connor, her eyes burning with an intense, utterly terrifying rage. She did not yell. She did not scream. She simply walked over to the trembling rookie, reached out, and brutally ripped the silver badge right off his chest. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Captain Elena ordered. Her voice was cold and completely merciless. Connor began to hyperventilate. Tears of absolute panic mixed with the cold rain streaming down his pale cheeks. He tried to stammer out an apology. He tried to claim it was a mistake, but his words were completely hollow. He was forced to turn around and place his hands on the freezing wet trunk of the police cruiser. Captain Elena pulled out her own handcuffs and secured them tightly around Connor's wrists. The loud metallic clicks echoed loudly in the night air. The predator had officially become the prey. The professional and legal fallout for Connor was nothing short of apocalyptic. Because Aaliyah was a federal judge, she did not let the local police department handle the investigation internally. She forwarded the unedited footage directly to the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Connor was not just fired. He was federally indicted on multiple felony charges. These charges included destruction of property, official misconduct, falsifying a police report, and deprivation of civil rights. He was permanently stripped of his pension. He was completely bankrupted by staggering legal fees. Ultimately, Connor was sentenced to 3 years in a federal penitentiary. The young man who thought he was completely invincible found himself locked in a steel cage. His entire life was entirely destroyed by a single arrogant swing of his flashlight. Rookie Officer Marcus did not escape completely unscathed either. He was heavily disciplined for failing to intervene, given a massive suspension without pay. He was forced to undergo months of intensive ethics retraining. It was a brutal reminder that silence in the face of corruption is completely unacceptable. Aaliyah, however, simply got back into her luxury Mercedes that night. She turned on the heated seats, put the car into drive, and drove the rest of the way home in completely undisturbed peace. She did not gloat. She did not celebrate. She simply used the immense power of her intellect and her position to surgically remove a dangerous predator from the streets. This story is a profoundly powerful reminder of the absolute terrifying reality of unchecked authority. A badge does not make a person honorable. Power without absolute accountability always breeds absolute corruption. It forces us to confront the deeply uncomfortable truth about our society. For every corrupt cop caught on camera, there are 1,000 others operating in the dark. They are destroying lives without consequence. But this story also shows us that true power does not roar. True power does not need to scream or threaten or break things. True power is cold, calculated, perfectly disciplined, and always waiting for the exact right moment to strike. See you in the next one.